I still remember the first time I saw the trailer for X. I can't quite recall what movie the trailer was attached to, but I remember being instantly intrigued right from that TCM-style van shot. After realizing that I'd seen a few films from the director Ty West, Innkeepers and House of the Devil, I was sold. Slap that A24 logo on there, and my ticket was basically bought. X went on to become my favorite horror movie of 2022, rivaled only by Zach Cregger's Barbarian. So when I discovered that Ty West and company had filmed a secret prequel to X at the same time that would release the same year, I was extremely curious. What's going on, guys? I am Mark. This is Tales from the Shelf, and in July 2024, Ty West will release the third chapter in the X trilogy, Maxxxine. Me personally, I am super excited to see this 80s neon-drenched noir murder mystery that Ty West has been cooking up. So with us being 2 years removed from X and Pearl and Maxxxine being right around the corner, I figured this would be the perfect time to revisit both of those films. This video will be split into two parts. The first one covering X and the second half covering Pearl. If you have not seen one or both of these films, this is your spoiler warning. I will be going into great detail about both of these films and also possibly speculating about where things could be headed in Maxxxine. So if you still need to watch those two movies to get ready for Maxxxine, maybe skip this video and come back later after you've done your homework. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's take a look at X, or as I like to call it,
I see one goddamn fucked up horror picture.
X is the story of Maxxxine Minx, an up-and-coming porn star with big aspirations for fame and fortune. Her and her boyfriend Wayne are about to film their debut porno, or as director RJ likes to call them, dirty movies. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me introduce the cast of our salacious slasher movie. Their crew consists of Maxxxine, Wayne, aforementioned director RJ, porn actors Bobby Lynn and Jackson, played by Kid Cudi, and RJ's shy girlfriend Lorraine. X is in many ways a meta slasher. It knows exactly what kind of movie it is, occasionally taking time to all but address the audience to deliver the thesis of the movie, which is, to put it bluntly, that it is possible to make a good dirty movie.
Because it is possible to make a good dirty movie.
In addition to being borderline meta, X is laden with Easter eggs and foreshadowing. These things reward repeat viewings, as well as give further context to Pearl, which we will cover in the second half of this video. The gang has rented a bunkhouse on the property of Howard and Pearl, the antagonists of X. This bunkhouse was used back in the war days to house Army veterans as they made their transition coming back from the war. Here it will serve a much more risque purpose and provide the location for our titular dirty movie, The Farmer's Daughters. X is, if nothing else, a bit of a jack of all trades. The movie has moments of comedy, it has great gore and kills, and it even has moments where you get a little sad. It really is a cut above most modern horror films, particularly slashers, because not only is it paying homage to the horror films that came before it, but it also has something that it's really trying to say, and it says it really well. Early on, Maxxxine comes face to face with Pearl, played in a double role here by Mia Goth. Pearl and Maxxxine are very similar in a lot of ways, as will become evident through the course of this video. They represent two sides of the same coin. Pearl is the old, unfulfilled, and envious woman who sees a lot of herself in Maxxxine, a young, carefree girl who is sexually uninhibited and eager to prove herself to the world. Remember this dynamic because it's going to be important as we move forward. After a fashion, the crew begins to film their adult movie with a bit of a meta flourish.
I reckon it's about high time we cut to the chase and we give the people what they want to see.
And afterwards, they all sit around and talk about the morals of what it is that they do. They have a pretty nuanced conversation about how one can be in love with somebody but also have sex with another person. They talk about the incoming home video market that Wayne's character is very eager to get in on the ground floor of. And they also address a little bit of the hypocrisy of those who look down on those in the adult film industry. I enjoy how the film takes the time to call out those who look down on those in the sex industry, but also are not unwilling to indulge in the fruits of their labor at the same time. It's a quick thing, but I appreciate its presence here nonetheless. What follows this conversation is a musical rendition of Fleetwood Mac's Landslide by Bobby Lynn and Jackson. This is intercut with scenes of Pearl back in the main house, putting on makeup in an attempt to look like Maxxxine. Pearl tries to seduce Howard, but his heart issues prevent him from partaking. This use of split screen here does double duty in both driving home the lyrics of the song Landslide through juxtaposition, as well as employing a film technique popularized by other filmmakers in the 70s, such as Brian De Palma, further giving the film that very 70s look and feel. So after this touching scene, Lorraine announces to the group that she wants to do a scene in the movie, to which boyfriend RJ immediately shoots it down, citing the fact that the story cannot suddenly change midway through, which is a clever little bit of dialogue. In another bit of clever dialogue, one of the characters says that nobody cares about the plot, they just want to see the TNA. Wayne takes RJ outside and tries to calm him down, telling him that, he hasn't been 42, but he has been 23, and that he should really listen to his advice. If RJ tries to control Lorraine, she is likely to resent him for it down the road. RJ goes along with it at first, but later that night, in a fit of jealous rage, he suddenly decides to leave everyone behind and take the van with him. As he goes to leave, he is met by Pearl, who tries to seduce him after being denied by Howard, and it looks like tonight she's just not taking no for an answer. RJ does the sensible thing and tries to get her back inside to her husband, but before he can do that, Pearl stabs him in the neck. She proceeds to brutally stab him in the neck, all set to a really cool needle drop in Don't Fear the Reaper, and another bit of meta commentary. So once RJ's taken out and we kind of know what's going on, the rest of the film plays out where throughout the course of the night, different characters wake up, all to varying degrees of sinister activity going on. Howard seems to be a loving husband who's just trying to wrangle his mentally ill wife, but as the film progresses, we discover that Howard's not really all that sane either. He has a real disdain for the young, in particular, fellow Marine and super well-equipped Jackson. So backing up a little bit, earlier in the film, there is a scene where Maxxxine is swimming in the lake, and there's a gator there who almost eats her about the skin of her teeth. This scene is cool because it delivers some tension early on in the film, and it also lets you know that this is now Chekhov's gator, and basically someone in the movie is gonna die to this gator at some point. That unfortunate someone is Bobby Lynn, who tries to help Pearl when she sees her sitting out by the dock naked and alone. Pearl spits at her attempts to help her, instead calling her a whore. Bobby Lynn understandably says, "Hey, okay, never mind then, fuck you." However, before she can leave, Pearl pushes her into the lake, providing Chekhov the alligator with a late dinner. Pearl then says to Howard, who's just arrived on the scene, "You know I don't like blondes," which is a cryptic statement that will gain further significance in Pearl. The funny thing about our young cast here is that despite being looked at with disdain by the elder villains, they're really nice and super willing to go out of their way to help out and do whatever they can to, make sure that they're not disturbing this old couple any more than they have to. I thought that was kind of a funny touch because it's you find in real life that, as much as older people would like to suggest that the younger generation is all super rude and disrespectful, and of course there's always exceptions to the rule, I found for the most part that that's just not really the case. So after everyone but Lorraine and Maxxxine are left alive, we reach a climactic finale inside the house. In this finale, Maxxxine and Pearl come head to head again. Lorraine tries to run away and gets absolutely blasted by Howard's shotgun. It's kind of funny. Howard then has a straight-up heart attack and dies after being frightened by Lorraine's mangled corpse. He's trying to move it, and it has this final death rattle, and it just sends him over the edge. Hey, he said he had a bad heart, I'm just glad he got to, bang one more time before he kicked the bucket, so. Maxxxine, pretty unsympathetically, decides to run in and capitalize on this moment with Wayne's gun and demands the keys to Howard's truck. Pearl tries to use Howard's shotgun to kill Maxxxine as she's trying to escape, but as she does, she gets blown back, hilariously so, if I might add, and breaks her hip, which is another little setup and payoff there. Howard had a bad heart earlier in the film, died of a heart attack. Howard kept worrying that Pearl was going to break her hip, broke her hip. These movies do that setup and payoff thing so often, both X and Pearl, and it really rewards repeat viewings and makes you like happy to watch them over and over because you just catch more things every time you do. Here in the closing moments of the film, we discover that Maxxxine is actually the daughter of a preacher who has run away from her father's restrictive lifestyle in search of something with a little bit more fame and excess. She ironically quotes a line from one of his sermons saying that she will not accept a life she does not deserve, although in this context it is a little bit different than what he had initially intended. Right before Maxxxine runs over Pearl's head like a watermelon, Pearl warns Maxxxine that eventually one day she will lose everything that makes her special, just like Pearl did. This could be something of a prophetic line that goes on to bear some fruit in Maxxxine, so maybe stick that in your back pocket for July 5th. So, that was X. Pretty fucked up horror picture, right? Let's unpack some of the themes that this movie has to offer, shall we? First, the film is making a very outward commentary on religion and seemingly outdated values, and how the youth of the day is doomed to repeat the cycle of rebelling against their elders and their seemingly outdated morals. Second, the film is making a statement on elderly people and the stigmas they endure and how they're perceived by people in society. Of course, it's heightened for dramatic effect, but the root of it is still there. The film is sympathetic towards them, but it also calls out the old people's penchant for being bitter at a world that is seemingly leaving them behind. And then finally, the film is just a reminder to audiences that you should live life fully and without regrets. And don't be quick to judge others. You know, really try to live without regrets because eventually we're going to be too old to do a lot of the things that we used to do. Alright, time to shift gears here and let's talk about Pearl, shall we? So right away, as we're watching Pearl, we get the vibe that this film is a lot different than X, instead opting for a sort of more classic American film, Technicolor look, almost like Wizard of Oz, accompanied by period-accurate music. You know, it's got a little bit more of a whimsical feel going on than something like X. But underneath that whimsical, dreamlike feel is some darker tones as well. So early on, we come to understand that Pearl is unhappy and unfulfilled with her day-to-day life, instead considering herself special and dreaming of stardom. In X, Pearl tells Maxxxine that she's not special, which is a bit of an ironic quip given what we come to learn about her in Pearl. So throughout Pearl, you get all sorts of context and little Easter eggs that become relevant in X. So when you look at both X and Pearl like we're doing today, it's important to remember a lot of this stuff because if it's true with Pearl and X, then it stands to reason that in Maxxxine, a lot of the stuff that happens in these first two movies will be relevant. Pearl is living under the thumb of her pragmatic mother, Ruth. Pearl is also burdened by the fact that she has to help take care of her disabled father. We also learn that during this time, Howard is away in the war, leaving Pearl pretty much all alone with her family. The only escape she really gets from her unsatisfying home life is when she gets to slip off to town and buy supplies and stuff. In keeping with some of the meta aspects of X, Pearl is set during the Spanish flu, so there's lots of imagery that is all too evocative to audiences of a post-2020 life. Lots of face masks and stuff like that. When she's in town, Pearl likes to go to the movies, and she also likes to indulge in a little bit of her father's medicine. While at the movies, she meets this charming projectionist who talks movies with her. Without too many outlets at home, this projectionist represents an outlet for a lot of the things that she never gets to talk about. Before they part ways, he gives her a film cell from the movie that she just saw and tells her to drop by anytime. On the way home, perhaps because she's riled up from her meeting with this handsome projectionist man, Pearl does some freaky shit with a scarecrow.
May I have this dance?
This scarecrow to me represents a captive audience who has to sit there and watch Pearl's choreographed dance routine, as well as be the object of her sexual urges, what with Howard being away and all. This scene really drives home the fact that Pearl might not be on the up and up. I really hope for the scarecrow's sake that there was an intimacy coordinator on set. As soon as Pearl gets home, it's right back to doing shit that she doesn't want to do. She's sort of stuck in that classic movie trope of being trapped between familial responsibility and personal ambition. Later on that night, we see Pearl doing some kind of sadistic things to her father, like pinching his skin and stuff. Similar to the Scarecrow, her dad is kind of a captive audience as well. She knows that he can't do anything to stop her or speak out, call her out on it, so she kind of is just able to get away with it. It's kind of fucked up. So it's interesting because Pearl's mother is pretty strict, but she's also not unreasonable. This movie's set in 1918, and I would imagine that during this time, this kind of family values were not uncommon, and it was kind of expected of most people to help out with their families and stuff. So it wouldn't really be considered unfair or uncommon to expect Pearl to do the things that she does. But Pearl being so ambitious and like carefree, it wouldn't be such an issue if we didn't also know that she's like clinically insane. Later on, Pearl is visited by her sister-in-law Mitzi and her mother, who are both very well off financially. They try to gift Pearl and Ruth with a nice fat pig, but Ruth does not accept charity and refuses. Mitzi tells Pearl about an upcoming dance audition for a traveling dance troupe. Pearl sees this as the opportunity that she's been waiting all this time for to get out of this family life and get on with her dreams. Right here, I just want to point out that Pearl does this thing where it uses like a lot of screen wipes and other transitions that would be of the time for films of this era. I really appreciate how it does it in Pearl, and they do it in X as well with the split screen that I mentioned earlier. So it stands to reason that in Maxxxine we'll get to see some kind of 80s style transitions and stuff. So look forward to that. That night, Pearl sneaks off to visit the projectionist, confiding in him her dreams of stardom. After this, the projectionist shows her a pornographic film. He explains that they might be illegal now, but eventually they won't be, and before too long, people will be lining up to see films just like the one that he's showing her right now. So this is another cool parallel because similar to Wayne, who is eager to get in on the ground floor of the upcoming home video market, the projectionist is going to be on the ground floor of pornographic films here in the United States at the turn of the century. These are some entrepreneurial men who are, eager to profit off of people's desire to see sexual things, which is pretty meta because we're watching movies where that's kind of what we're being sold on. So very interesting. A lot of meta commentary going on in these films. It's also kind of cool to see the juxtaposition of like what porn was like back then and what it goes on to become like in the 70s. And what it would eventually still go on to become like in the modern day. So it's sort of chronicles the evolution of the industry. I'm sure we'll get to see a little bit more of that in Maxxxine as well. Pearl seems like she's just happy to have someone to talk about her dreams with, even if to us it kind of seems like the guy just wants to bang her. Whatever his intentions might be, he does advise Pearl to go out and see the world and be in movies if that's what she wants to do. So he doesn't really seem like he's all that bad of a guy, telling her what she wants to hear maybe, but he's a source of positivity in an otherwise sequestered lifestyle. During her time with the projectionist, Pearl comes to the morbid realization that if her parents were to just die, then she'd be free to do whatever she wants. Pearl begins to show further signs of her mental health deteriorating, doing weird shit like crushing goose eggs and stuff with her bare hands. It's just weird. We see her toying heavily with the idea of feeding her disabled father to Chekhov the alligator. In her eyes, it seems like just like a mercy killing, because it's like, her father's paralyzed. He can't really do anything. Before she can, her mother interrupts her, and after an exchange of words, she reminds Pearl that it's not always about getting what you want, but rather making the most of what you have. That night, Ruth makes Pearl quarantine in the bunkhouse after learning that she went into town again. Remember, this is set during the Spanish flu, so they were doing shit like quarantining and stuff. Before it comes to that though, Ruth and Pearl start trading words and just start yelling at each other and unload all of the feelings that they've been feeling up until now. It all comes to a head when Pearl and Ruth get into a physical altercation, ending up with Ruth being really badly burned. Pearl hides her body in the basement and then she goes off and sleeps with the projectionist. Here we can kind of establish that in Pearl's mind there is a connection between sex and violence, which you could also look at as sort of a thesis for both of these two films. Pearl begins to see Howard like everywhere, which is, in my opinion, a manifestation of her guilt and her inability to reconcile all the things that she's been doing. Pearl later invites the projectionist inside her home. However, she is unable to completely hide all of the evidence from what happened last night, and the projectionist starts to see some major red flags as her facade of normalcy begins to slip. He quickly realizes that Pearl is a stage 5 clinger and that he has made a serious mistake. Before too long, the mask of sanity is completely gone and Pearl kills the projectionist for leaving her. After killing him, Pearl goes inside and suffocates her father as well, and in the process severs all ties to a life that she does not deserve. This leaves her free to go to the audition that Mitzi had told her about and follow her dreams with nothing to hold her back. Unfortunately, the audition does not go super well. The audition scene is sort of like the core of the film distilled, where it shifts into this like dream scenario complete with backup dancers as well as some fireworks. It takes on this really classic American film approach to kind of channel the time and place that they're really going for here. Unfortunately for Pearl, she is informed that they are looking for someone blonde, someone with X factor. And this would explain why Pearl does not like blondes. So yeah, Pearl does not get the part and she just makes an absolute scene, fulfilling her mother's prophetic words from earlier about her inevitably failing. Mitzi and Pearl both go back to Pearl's house, where we see the pig. It's still on the porch that I mentioned earlier, and it's like totally rotting. We get little glimpses of this pig throughout the course of the film, and here it's like totally covered in maggots and stuff. And perhaps I'm looking for symbolism where there is none, but it's possible that the pig could be intended to serve as a visual metaphor for Pearl's continuously deteriorating mental state, just slowly decaying and rotting over the course of the film. The finale here with Pearl and Mitzi is super tense as we witness Pearl deliver a truckload-sized trauma dump on her sister-in-law. As the audience, there is this built-in tension and fear that the audience has for Mitzi because, as we know, the last 3 people that Pearl was alone with did not live very long. So this is where we get Pearl's famous monologue. It's really good. It's just an incredible piece of acting here, and whether or not you think it should have gotten an Oscar, regardless, it is very impressive, and just you kind of just have to watch it. I'm not going to be able to do it justice here. But yeah, in this monologue, Pearl reveals that she was pregnant and had a miscarriage, and that she is just overall pretty bitter towards Howard for leaving her all alone. Like, almost like in her mind, this has all been his fault. So yeah, I think the monologue's like something like 7 minutes long, and when Pearl's done, we finally cut back to Mitzi, who's just like, okay. Pearl seems pretty convinced that Mitzi got the part because she's blonde, but Mitzi denies it, and we never really find out one way or another if Mitzi did get it, but it also doesn't really matter because I think at this point Pearl has already decided that she's gonna kill Mitzi. So at this point, Pearl's like pretty resigned to her fate. You know, she's ready to live a normal life. And right before she kills Mitzi, she recites her mother's words from earlier about how it's not about getting what you want, but getting the best out of what you have. So in a quick montage, Pearl does her best to cover her tracks and hide any evidence from all the murders that she just committed in an attempt to restore some semblance of order to her fractured existence. I guess back then it was easier to just get away with like multiple murders. But hey, look who's home. It's Howard. He doesn't seem super thrilled. And then we get the famous shot of the credits rolling over Pearl's face as she smiles very painfully at Howard and at us, the audience, as well. It's like super hard not to look away. It's like watching a train wreck. It's like, it's very uncomfortable. It's designed to be uncomfortable, and it's very effective, and it's an effective way to end this particular movie. So that was Pearl. Admittedly, I like X a lot more, but Pearl is a very welcome prequel that provides a lot of context for what eventually goes on to happen in X, and overall just makes for a really great double feature. And so with Maxxxine on the way, I'm inclined to think that when it's all said and done, this has the potential to be like one of the best horror trilogies of all time. Maybe, I don't know, call me crazy here, but I'm really excited for Maxxxine. I love these 2 films. And I think we might have another banger on our hands. As far as themes go, Pearl could be seen as trying to deliver a message about those who live with mental illness and the dangers of it going unaddressed. It also deals with family dynamics and parental responsibilities and just how, it can be difficult to find a healthy balance. All of it is, of course, heightened to dramatic effect for the purpose of making a theatrical experience. But at the core of it, if you peel back the layers a bit, there is some truth to what I've been saying. The great thing about the X movies, and horror movies in general, is that sometimes you are able to get out what you put into them. On the surface, it might just seem like a dumb slasher with a lot of nudity, but at the end of the day, there's actually a little bit more going on under the surface. A good, dirty movie, you might say. Alright guys, so that was X and Pearl. I really hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown and analysis. Let me know down in the comments if you're excited for Maxxxine like I am. I'm super pumped for it. Tell me, did I miss any important themes that maybe you picked up on in either X or Pearl? I'd be super curious to know what you guys have gotten out of these movies, as clearly I am a pretty big fan. Alright guys, drop a like if you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing if you like this and you want to see some similar style video essays, as well as a variety of other movie-related content. And as always, please remember to take care and watch more movies.